I'm so excited to be here today with Isabella, and we are back on the CISO Guide to Cyber Resilience podcast, your go-to source for the latest developments in cybersecurity and expert strategies to keep your organization secure. I'm your host, Debra Baker, and as always, I'm joined by the amazing my amazing co-host, Isabella Otero. Isabella.
Debra, thank you so much. So happy to be here. And today we have a packed episode covering not only one, but two major data breaches that have made headlines recently: the National Public Data Breach and the Ticketmaster breach. Both of these incidents highlight serious failures in data security, and we'll explore what went wrong, the legal consequences, and key takeaways for cyber resilience. Let's dive in.
Yeah, so both of these we actually talked about a few months back, and now there's legal, basically there's lawsuits and there's a bankruptcy, and we're going to get into more of the details, but ramifications essentially of these breaches. So we're going to kick things off with the National Public Data Breach. For those who may not have heard, this breach affected around 300 million people and exposed hundreds of millions of Social Security numbers, along with other personally identifiable information. TechCrunch reports this breach was one of the largest this year, and it's having devastating consequences for the company involved.
Oof, that just sounds scary right off the bat. So the National Public Data is a Florida-based data broker. And back in April, a hacker infiltrated their systems, stealing billions of records. This breach includes names, date of birth, email addresses, phone numbers, and social security numbers. Shockingly, the stolen database contained around 270 million social security numbers. That's just terrifying.
Yeah. And I went back and checked that billions of records. I was like, is that right? No, that's exactly what TechCrunch said. I was just like, oh my goodness. So what's even more alarming is how the company handled the aftermath. Jericho Pictures, the parent company of National Public Data, has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, claiming they cannot repay their debts or deal with the flood of lawsuits. This means that affected individuals likely won't see any form of compensation or even credit monitoring.
Wow. And honestly, from here, it just gets worse. The company's insurance provider denied coverage after the breach, leaving National Public Data with fewer than $75,000 in assets. Most of their revenue had gone towards bulk data purchases and paying the CEO. So when the breach hit, they were financially unprepared to deal with this fallout.
Yeah, the situation raises some critical questions about the financial stability of data brokers and their responsibility in safeguarding such sensitive information. Not only was there a significant loss of PII, but it's likely that the legal and regulatory actions won't result in any meaningful compensation for the victims.
Exactly. And that is very sad to hear. This case really shows that data brokers need to invest more in their cybersecurity infrastructure. Relying on outdated or inadequate protections while handling such vast amounts of personal data is a recipe for disaster. If they don't change their approach, we could see more companies facing the same fate as National Public Data.
Yeah, and I went in and I did a little bit more research on this company, and it was a one person company. And he basically was making up to like $500,000 a year. So essentially, he's selling all of our private data, making all of this money, and he doesn't have a security team. He doesn't have an IT team. He doesn't, you know what I mean? He's just taking it for himself. And I was just like, what in the world? So anyway, it's definitely disheartening, and I can see why he's just filed for bankruptcy.
Right, right. No, that's crazy. Do we have a name? Do we know his name, or has that not been released
I'd
yet?
have to go look it up. Yeah, I don't remember. So Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the Ticketmaster data breach. And now let's turn to the second biggest breach that we're covering today, and that's Ticketmaster. Lawyer Monthly is reporting that this one has also sparked a class action lawsuit and involves some serious allegations of negligence. On April 2nd, 2024, the hacker group Shiny Hunters infiltrated Ticketmaster's database, compromising the personal information of approximately 560 million customers.
I think we heard someone in your background that's also upset about this data breach.
Yeah, my beagle. Yes.
But to continue, yes, this breach included sensitive details like full names, addresses, emails, phone numbers, and credit card information. What's troubling is that the breach went undetected for nearly 7 weeks, with Ticketmaster only becoming aware of it on May 23rd, 2024. And to make matters much worse, customers weren't notified until July 17th, 2 months after the breach was discovered. Now, I personally have never used Ticketmaster. I think I only had to use it once to sell tickets that I had. But it's one of those companies that I feel that they really don't have a lot of security, and like even using their website, it's a little bit glitchy from time to time, and you can kind of tell that they don't put their money where it needs to be like some of these companies.
Yeah, yeah. Well, immediately when I heard about this, I went and I changed my password. I
Yep.
was like, because I do have a Ticketmaster account, and I thought, well, that's something I can do. But at that point in time, it's scary even go to their website, because once there is a breach, then all the hackers come out and they're like, oh, what else can we get? What else can we do? And so it was a little scary, but I thought that's something I can do. And there wasn't even an option to set up multi-factor authentication, because
Yeah,
that was one thing I checked, and it
it's
wasn't even
crazy.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, like we're trying to be proactive, when things like this do happen, go in, change our passwords, turn on two-factor if they have it.
Yeah.
And that is, I feel like, something that every company should invest in.
Yeah.
Receiving a secure text message to your mobile device, it's harder for hackers to kind of disrupt that flow of getting that text message from your phone.
Right.
So I feel like there's so many, different measures they could take, but it's just they don't invest in those areas.
Yeah. Yeah. So during that time, the stolen data was listed for sale on the dark web for 500,000, putting millions of customers at risk of fraud and identity theft. This delayed response and failure to promptly inform customers has drawn sharp criticism.
And that class action lawsuit against Ticketmaster alleges negligence and unjust enrichment, seeking at least 5 million in damages for the affected users. The lawsuit claims that Ticketmaster failed to implement adequate security measures to protect customer data despite being aware of the risks. What's particularly damaging is that Ticketmaster's privacy policy stated that they had sufficient protections, but those didn't extend to their third-party vendor, Snowflake, which was managing their data.
Yes, yes. So, one of the things about Snowflake is when this first came out, like I was doing some research, and Snowflake had an announcement and they said, "We didn't have anything to do with this. We weren't breached. We didn't have anything to do with the Ticketmaster." And I was like, "What are they talking about?" And then because in Ticketmasters, they didn't mention Snowflake at all. But as I started looking into it more, that 165 of Snowflake customers' data was stolen. And there was just from last spring through, early summer, there was just company after company, and it was tied back to Snowflake. And they brought in Mandiant, they brought in CrowdStrike to make sure that they had not been breached, and they hadn't. What happened is all these customers did not have multi-factor authentication, and their credentials had been stolen, and some of them had been out like on the dark web since 2020. And I read one article that there was a third party that were and the employee, it sounded like it was probably like IT type of support, but it said that they had access to multiple customers and they had malware installed on their machine, and they were able to get steal passwords from that person, but it didn't directly, there was no actual breach at Snowflake. It was just getting these credentials, username, passwords, and then, just going on to Snowflake and actually logging in. And that's how the breach happened. So this failure to ensure third-party security is a violation of Section 5 of the Federal Trade Commission Act, which mandates reasonable security practices. The lawsuit also highlights that Ticketmaster didn't conduct proper security audits or require Snowflake to adopt enhanced security measures, which could have prevented this breach.
And Ticketmaster is now facing significant legal challenges, not just from this class action lawsuit, but also from an ongoing antitrust lawsuit brought by the US Department of Justice. And Snowflake, their third party vendor, is under file for their involvement in a previous breach affecting millions of AT&T customers. It's clear that both companies are facing an uphill battle when it comes to legal and regulatory consequences. So, Deborah, what do you think's going to happen? Like, do you think that an incident like this could put a company completely out of business for, it kind of ruining their rapport with customers and things like that? Because when you buy tickets for concerts, movies, things like that, who do you go to besides Ticketmaster and what, maybe Fandango is another one?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I even with the lawsuits, it's almost like too big to fail. I don't think that they'll go out of business or anything like that. I think they'll just, they'll put in, security measures. One of the things they're going to do is they're going to have to take security, serious. And Snowflake, one of the things Snowflake has already done is they have enforced MFA now as the default. So that's one thing that they've done. And they also have made it that you have to have at least a 14-character password.
Wow, no, that's pretty long. I'm
Yeah.
sure it requests, you have special characters, upper lowercase, all that good
Right,
stuff to make
right,
it more secure.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, what are the key lessons we can take away from these two massive breaches? First, it's clear that businesses need to be proactive about both internal and third-party security. National Public Data and Ticketmaster both failed to implement sufficient measures to protect customer information, and the financial and reputational consequences have been severe. 165 customers of Snowflake that had not implemented multi-factor authentication were breached. Simply turning on MFA would have prevented these breaches.
Exactly. The Ticketmaster case in particular highlights the importance of third party risk management. No matter how strong your own defenses are, you're only as secure as your weakest link. And in this case, Snowflake was the weakest link. Regular security audits, stricter vendor management policies, and robust incident response plans are essential.
Yeah. And let's not forget the importance of timely breach notification. Both companies delayed informing customers, leaving millions vulnerable to fraud and identity theft. Transparency and a swift response are crucial in managing the aftermath of a breach. Businesses need to prioritize their customers' security and trust, or they'll face more legal and just consequences. And essentially, you're going to be sued if you're not doing your due diligence and basic, cybersecurity.
Deborah, why do you think that these companies are not using MFA? Is it just maybe an extra expense, or like I feel like like this should be almost like mandatory at this point?
I know, I know. They're probably thinking, well, they're just buying tickets and, that's an extra step and, can the average person do this? Because now you've got to go and scan the code and, have Google Authenticator or whatever. In this particular, case, it was, I mean, it wasn't the end user, it was the actual administrator of, doing the data for Snowflake. I mean, the person at Ticketmaster, that was responsible for protecting that data. So having two-factor, yeah, definitely, they should have had two-factor authentication on. And I get it. It's hard because you have all these different applications. And I was thinking about it. I mean, I don't know if they have SOC 2. I don't know if they do or not. I would hope they do. But you pretty much have to have multi-factor authentication for your employees when they log in. But they probably just didn't check all these different applications. They just, they were like, well, we have it on our, I mean, I'm just guessing, for their regular email or whatever, if they have like SOC 2. And just nobody checked. One of the things they said is that they weren't doing any sort of internal audits or security checks or anything like that. So I'm sure they're getting very serious about cybersecurity now.
Oh, for sure. After something happens, they're like, oh, okay, it's time to do this.
Exactly. One thing I heard, because Equifax, they had this huge breach a couple years ago, and I thought, oh, are they going to go out of business? But they actually had just signed on to like this huge government contract. And I mean, they're just so huge. It was just kind of like too big to fail kind of a thing. But what I heard is they've completely turned around, done a 180, and they've got security, like a security mindset, and throughout the organization, which is great. I mean, that's what you want to see. It's too bad that they actually have to have a breach to understand that cybersecurity is important. I mean, so
I mean, once the fire has been lit, they're like, okay, it's time.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, how much money do you need now for your security program? Okay.
How much money did we lose? Oh gosh, we're not doing this again.
Exactly. So thanks everybody for listening. That wraps up today's episode. We covered 2 major breaches, the National Public Data and Ticketmaster, and explored the serious implications of poor cybersecurity practices. The lessons are clear. Businesses must invest in robust security measures, manage third-party risks effectively, and act quickly when things go wrong.
Thanks for tuning in to the CISO Guide to Cyber Resilience. Remember to stay informed, stay vigilant, and always prioritize cybersecurity. We'll see you next time with more insights into the latest threats and strategies to protect your organization.
Until then, stay resilient and stay secure. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to pick up a copy of my book, A CISO Guide to Cyber Resilience, available on Amazon. And remember to stay cyber resilient.